After the end of World War II in 1945, Europe was in complete ruins, and Germany in particular became a battleground for the division of influence among the victorious powers. On one side stood the United States and its allies in the West, and on the other, the Soviet Union in the East. This division was not just lines on a map, it marked the beginning of a long Cold War between two completely different systems: capitalism and democracy in the West, and communism and centralized control in the East. Germany, which was at the center of the conflict, was divided into four zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. Berlin, although located within the Soviet zone, was also divided into four sectors. Initially, this division was meant for post-war administration, but it quickly turned into a rigid political and economic wall between East and West. The differences began to clearly appear in daily life. In the West, Germany experienced rapid reconstruction and a booming economy, while in the East, the communist regime imposed strict controls and began restricting individual freedoms. From this point, the conflict between the two blocs began, and Germany became a symbol of the ideological struggle that would dominate the second half of the 20th century. In the summer of 1961, the situation in East Germany was rapidly deteriorating due to the escape of thousands of citizens to the West through Berlin. This was a severe blow to the communist regime, which was losing its professionals and young people who were seeking a better life and greater freedom. Then, on the night of August 13, 1961, and without warning, the authorities in East Germany began constructing a massive wall that stretched across the city. It wasn't just a concrete wall, it was a deep barrier that enforced the separation between East and West and restricted the freedom of millions. Under the cover of darkness, workers laid barbed wire and concrete slabs, streets were closed and roads were cut off. The Berlin Wall became a symbol of oppression, preventing the city's residents from seeing their families and friends, and turning Berlin into a divided city for 4 decades. At that time, both West and East Berliners were deeply shocked. Suddenly, they found themselves trapped in opposing systems. While West Berlin lived under democracy, East Berlin fell under the grip of surveillance and the secret police. The wall became a focal point of symbolic conflict between freedom and repression, inspiring stories of sorrow and hope that lasted for many years. When the Berlin Wall rose, the lives of millions changed overnight. It was not just a physical barrier, it became a psychological and cultural divide between families, friends, and communities that had been united just moments before. On the eastern side, people lived under intense surveillance, with the secret police, the Stasi, monitoring every movement and word. Citizens were afraid to express their opinions or even speak freely, for fear of arrest or harassment. Meanwhile, on the western side, people felt sorrow and grief over losing their neighbors and loved ones, but they enjoyed greater freedoms and growing economic prosperity. Children born after the wall was built never knew the unity Berlin once had before the division. The wall prevented meetings, separated schools, hospitals, and even workplaces. Some neighborhoods in the east became deserted as authorities isolated areas near the wall to prevent escape attempts. Amid an atmosphere filled with fear and suspicion, people tried to maintain normal lives despite all the restrictions. But the wall was always there, a constant reminder of division and the harsh reality they were forced to live in. Throughout the years of the Berlin Wall's existence, many refused to accept the harsh reality imposed by the division. On the contrary, thousands of people made daring attempts to escape from the oppressive life in the East to freedom in the West. These escape stories were filled with danger and ingenuity, as escapees used unexpected methods, from digging tunnels under the wall to using hot air balloons, small aircraft, and even armored vehicles. One of the most famous stories was that of Bruno Ritter, who rented a light aircraft and flew over the wall to escape. But the majority faced grim fates. Many were killed or captured, and numerous others were imprisoned or tortured. In East Berlin, the authorities monitored everything closely, and the orders were clear: prevent escapes at any cost. Attempting to cross the wall became a serious crime punishable by imprisonment or even death. On the other side, West Berlin made efforts to help escapees, with secret organizations supporting their efforts and providing shelter and assistance. These attempts were not just personal escapes, they became symbols of the struggle between freedom and oppression, and they proved the resilience of the human spirit in the face of even the most dangerous barriers. In the late 1980s, winds of change began to blow across Eastern Europe, and especially East Germany, with the rise of Mikhail Gorbachev to leadership of the Soviet Union in 1985. Gorbachev brought with him a new vision for reform under the banners of perestroika restructuring and glasnost openness, aiming to loosen the grip of centralized control and allow more political and economic freedoms. These changes inspired the people of the Eastern Bloc, particularly in East Germany, where popular protest movements emerged demanding reform, freedom of movement, and freedom of expression. Cities like Leipzig and East Berlin witnessed massive peaceful demonstrations organized by citizens calling for the fall of the wall and an end to repression. Despite the regime's attempts to maintain control through force, the pressure from the streets was overwhelming. The Soviet Union's decreasing support for the East German regime significantly weakened its position. Over time, the fall of the wall became a matter of when, not if, as the protests expanded beyond local demands into a broader symbol of people's rising against oppression and totalitarian rule. That moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Germany and the world. On November 9, 1989, something happened that had seemed unthinkable just days earlier. An East German official unexpectedly announced that travel between East and West was now permitted immediately. This announcement triggered a massive rush of citizens toward the Berlin Wall, where people began cutting through barbed wire, climbing the wall, and celebrating a long-awaited freedom. There was virtually no resistance from the security forces, who appeared hesitant and unprepared to confront the crowds. In that moment, the wall was no longer just a physical barrier between two regions, it was a symbol of oppression and division that collapsed under the weight of the people's will. This historic event set off a chain of political and social changes that led to the official reunification of Germany on October 3, 1990, after decades of painful separation. The reunification was not just the end of isolation and concrete borders. It marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with economic and social challenges as both halves of the country worked to reunite. Still, the fall of the Berlin Wall stood as a triumph of democracy and freedom, a clear sign that people will not accept injustice or borders imposed by force. The story of the wall's fall remains a lasting symbol of hope and resistance against oppressive regimes. Its impacts still felt to this day. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the impact of this historic event did not stop at Germany's borders. It became a major turning point in global politics and reshaped how people around the world viewed freedom and democracy. To begin with, the reunification of Germany elevated the country's status as a central economic and political power in Europe, contributing significantly to the formation of the modern European Union. It also marked a critical turning point in ending the Cold War, which had divided the world for decades and led to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union just a few years later. On a human level, the fall of the wall became a lasting lesson in the power of peaceful change and the determination of people to seek freedom. It inspired protest movements in many other countries, demanding reform and democratic rights. However, despite the overwhelming success, unified Germany faced economic and social challenges, particularly in integrating the societies of East and West Berlin. Feelings of inequality and difference persisted among some groups, highlighting the deep scars left by decades of division. Even today, the Berlin Wall remains a powerful symbol, a reminder of the importance of unity, the need to protect individual freedoms, and a past that must never be forgotten. Its story teaches us that no wall, no matter how tall or strong, can suppress the human will for freedom that comes from within.